Welcome to the Thousand Nights and One Night. Today we continue on the 13th night. She said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the second Kalandar thus continued his tale to the lady. But when, O my mistress, I kicked that alcove with a mighty kick, behold, the air darkened and thundered and lightninged. The earth trembled and quaked, and the world became invisible. At once the fumes of wine left my head, and I cried to her, 'What is the matter?' And she replied, 'The Ifrit is upon us. Did I not warn thee of this? By Allah, thou hast brought ruin upon me. But fly for thy life, and go up the way thou camest down.' So I fled up the staircase, but in the excess of my fear I forgot sandals and hatchet. And when I had mounted 2 steps, I turned to look for them, and lo, I saw the earth cleave asunder, and there arose from it an Ifrit, a monster of hideousness, who said to the damsel, 'What trouble and pother be this wherewith thou disturbest me? What mishap hath betided thee?' 'No mishap hath befallen me,' she answered, 'save that my breast was straitened, and my heart heavy with sadness. So I drank a little wine to broaden it and to hearten myself, and then I arose to obey a call of nature. But the wine had got into my head, and I fell against the alcove.' 'Thou liest, like the whore that thou art!' shrieked the Ifrit. And he looked around the hall, right and left, until he caught sight of my axe and sandals, and said to her, 'What be these but the belongings of some mortal who hath been in thy society?' She answered, 'I never set eyes upon them till this moment. They must have been brought by thee hither cleaving to thy garments.' Quoth the Ifrit, 'These words are absurd, thou harlot, thou strumpet.' Then he stripped her stark naked, and stretching her upon the floor, bound her hands and feet to 4 stakes like one crucified, and set about torturing her and trying to make her confess. I could bear to stand listening to her cries and groans. So I climbed the stair on the quake with fear, and when I reached the top, I replaced the trapdoor and covered it with earth. Then I repented of what I had done with penitent sorrow, and thought of the lady and her beauty and her loveliness, and the tortures she was suffering at the hands of the accursed Ifrit after her quiet life of 25 years, and all that had happened to her was for cause of me. I bethought me of my father and his kingly estate, and how I had become a woodcutter, and how after my time had been a while serene, the world had again waxed turbid and troubled to me. So I wept bitterly, and repeated this couplet: 'What time fate's tyranny shall most oppress thee, perpend, one day shall joy thee, one distress thee.' Then I walked until I reached the home of my friend the tailor, whom I found most anxiously expecting me. Indeed, he was, as the saying goes, on coals of fire for my account. And when he saw me, he said, 'All night long my heart hath been heavy, fearing for thee from wild beasts or other mischances. Now praise be to Allah for thy safety.' I thanked him for his friendly solitude, and retiring to my corner, sat pondering and musing on what had befallen me. And I blamed and chided myself for my meddlesome folly and my frowardness in kicking the alcove. I was calling myself to account when, behold, my friend the tailor came to me, and he said, 'All youth in the shop, there is an old man, a Persian, who seeketh thee. He hath thy hatchet and thy sandals, which he had taken to the woodcutters, saying, I was going out at what time the muezzin began to the call to dawn praying. When I chanced upon these things, and know not whose they are, so direct me to their owner.' The woodcutters recognized thy hatchet and directed him to thee. He is sitting in my shop, so fare forth to him and thank him, and take thine axe and sandals.' When I heard these words, I turned yellow with fear, and felt stunned as by a blow, and before I could recover myself, lo, the floor of my private room clove asunder, and out of it rose the Persian, who was the Ifrit. He had tortured the lady with exceeding tortures. Natheless, she would not confess to him aught. So he took the hatchet and sandals and said to her, As surely as I am Jurgis of the seed of Iblis, I will bring thee back the owner of this and these. Then he went to the woodcutters with the pretense aforesaid, and being directed to me after waiting a while in the shop, till the fact was confirmed, he suddenly snatched me up as a hawk snatcheth a mouse, and flew high in the air, but presently descended, and plunged with me under the earth, I being a swoon the while, and lastly set me down in the subterranean palace wherein I had passed that blissful night. And there I saw the lady stripped to the skin, her limbs bound to 4 stakes, and blood welling from her sides. At the sight, my eyes ran over with tears, but the Ifrit covered her person and said, O wanton, is not this man thy lover? And she looked upon me and replied, I wot him not, nor have I seen him before this hour. Quoth the Ifrit, What? This torture and yet no confessing? And quoth she, I never saw this man in my born days. It is not lawful in Allah's sight to tell lies on him. If thou knowest him not, said the Ifrit to her, take this sword and strike off his head. She hent the sword in her hand and came close up to me, and I signaled to her with my eyebrows, my tears the while flowing down my cheek. She understood me and made answer also by signs. How couldst thou bring all this evil upon me? And I rejoined after the same fashion, This is the time for mercy and forgiveness. And the mute tongue of my case spake aloud, saying, My eyes were dragoman's, for my tongue betide, and told full clear the love I fain would hide, when last we met, and tears and torrents railed, for tongues struck dumb by glances testified. She signed with eye glance while her lips were mute. I signed with fingers, and she keened the implied. Our eyebrows did all duty twixt us twain, and we being speechless, love spake loud and plain. Then, O my mistress, the lady, threw away the sword and said, How shall I strike the neck of one I wot not, and who hath done me no evil? Such deed were not lawful in my law. And she held her hand. Said the Ifrit, 'Tis grievous to thee to slay thy lover, and because he hath lain with thee, thou endurest these torments, and obstinately refusest to confess. After this, it is clear to me that only like loveth and pitieth like. Then he turned to me and asked me, O man, haply thou dost not know this woman? Whereto I answered, And pray, who may she be? Surely I never saw her till this instant. Then take the sword, said he, and strike off her head, and I will believe that thou wottest her not, and will leave thee free to go, and will not deal hardly with thee. I replied, That will I do. And taking the sword, I went forward sharply and raised my hand to smite. But she signed me with her eyebrows. Have I failed thee in aught of love? And is it thus that thou requitest me? I understood what her looks implied, and answered her with an eye glance. I will sacrifice my soul for thee. And the tongue of the case wrote on our hearts these lines. How many a lover with his eyebrows speaketh, to his beloved as his passion pleadeth. With flashing eyne his passion he inspired, and well she seeth what his pleading needeth. How sweet the look when each on each gazeth, and with what swiftness, and how sure it speedeth. And this with eyebrows all his passion writeth, that his eyeballs all his passion readeth. Then my eyes filled with tears to overflowing, and I cast the sword from my hand, saying, O mighty Ifrit and hero, if a man lacking wits and faith deem it unlawful to strike off my head, how can it be lawful for me, a man, to smite her neck, whom I never saw in my whole life? I cannot do such misdeed. Thou cause me drink the cup of death and perdition. Then said the Ifrit, Ye twain show the good understanding between you, and I will let you see how such things and such doings end. And he took the sword and struck off the lady's hands first with 4 strokes, and then her feet. Whilst I looked on and made sure of death, she farewelled me with her dying eyes. So the Ifrit cried at her, Thou whorest, and makest me withal with thine eyes, and struck her so that her head went flying. Then turned to me and said, O mortal, we have it in our law that when a wife committeth adultery, it is lawful for us to slay her. As for this damsel, I snatched her away on her bride night when she was a girl of 12, and she knew no one but myself. I used to come to her once every 10 days and lie with her the night under the semblance of a man, a Persian. And when I was well assured that she had cuckolded me, I slew her. But as for thee, I am not well satisfied that thou hast wronged me in her. Nevertheless, I must not let thee go unharmed. So ask a boon of me, and I will grant it. I rejoiced, O my lady, with exceeding joy, and said, What boon shall I crave of thee? He replied, Ask me this boon. Into what shape I shall bewitch thee? Wilt thou be a dog, or an ass, or an ape? I rejoined, and indeed I had hoped that mercy might be shown to me. By Allah, spare me, and Allah spare thee for sparing a Moslem and a man who never wronged thee. And I humbled myself before him with exceeding humility and remained standing in his presence, saying, I am sore oppressed by circumstance. He replied, Talk me no long talk. It is in my power to slay thee, but I give thee instead thy choice. Quoth I, O thou Ifrit, it would beset thee to pardon me, even as the Envied pardoned the Envier. Quoth he, And how was that? And I began to tell him the tale of the Envier and the Envied. They related, O Ifrit, that in a certain city where two men dwelt in adjoining houses, having a common party wall, and one of them envied the other, and looked on him with an evil eye, and did his utmost endeavor to injure him. And albeit at one time he was jealous of his his neighbor, his malice at last grew on him, till he could hardly eat or enjoy the sweet pleasures of sleep. But the envy did nothing save prosper, and the more the other strove to injure him, the more he got and gave and throve. At last the malice of his neighbor and the man's constant endeavor to work him a harm to come to his knowledge. So he said, By Allah, God's earth is wide enough for its people. And leaving the neighborhood, he repaired to another city, where he bought himself a piece of land in which was a dried up, drawn well, old and in ruinous condition. He rebuilt him an oratory, and finishing with a few necessities, took up his abode therein, and devoted himself to prayer and worshiping Allah Almighty. And the fakirs and holy mendicants flocked to him from all quarters, and his fame went abroad through the city and that countryside. Presently the news reached his envious neighbor of what good fortune had befallen him, and how the city notables had become his disciples. So he traveled to the place and presented himself at the holy man's hermitage, and was met by the envied with welcome and greetings and all honor. Then quoth the envier, I have a word to say to thee, and this is the cause of my faring hither, and I wish to give thee a piece of good news. So come with me to thy cell. Thereupon the envier rose and took the envier by the hand, and they went in the innermost part of the hermitage. But the envier said, Bid thy fakirs retire to their cells, for I will not tell thee what I have to say, save in secret where none may hear us. Accordingly, the envied said to his fakirs, Retire to your private cells. And when all had done as he had bade them, he set out with his visitor, and walked a little while until the twain reached the ruinous old well. And as they stood upon the brink, the envier gave the envied a push, which tumbled him headlong into it, unseen of any. Whereupon he fared forth and went his way, thinking to have slain him. Now, this well happened to be haunted by the Jan, who, seeing the case, bore him up and let him down little by little, till he reached the bottom, when they seated him upon a large stone. Then one of them asked his fellows, Wot ye who be this man? And they answered, Nay. This man, continued the speaker, is the envied height, who flying from the Envier came to dwell in our city, and here founded this holy house. And he hath edified us with his litanies and his lections of the Koran. But the Envier set out and journeyed till he rejoined him, and cunningly contrived to deceive him, and cast him into the well where we are now. But the fame of this good man hath this very night come to the Sultan of our city, who designeth to visit him on the morrow on account of his daughter. What aileth his daughter? Asked one. And another answered, She is possessed of a spirit, for Maimon, son of Damdam, is madly in love with her. But if this pious man knew the remedy, her cure would be as easy as could be. Hereupon one of them inquired, And what is this medicine? And he replied, The black tomcat, which is with him in the oratory, hath on end of his tail a white spot, the size of a dirham. Let him pluck 7 white hairs from the spot, then let him fumigate her therewith, and the murid will flee from her and not return, so she shall be sane for the rest of her life. All this took place, O Ifrit, within earshot of the Envied, who listened readily. When dawn broke and morn arose in sheen and shone, the fakirs went to seek the sheikh, and found him climbing up the wall of the well, whereby he was magnified in their eyes. Then, knowing that naught save the black tomcats could supply him with the remedy required, he plucked the 7 tail hairs from the white spot and laid them by him. And hardly had the sun risen ere the Sultan entered the hermitage with the great lords of his estate, bidding the rest of his retinue to remain standing outside. The Envied gave him a hearty welcome, and seating him by his side, asked him, Shall I tell thee the cause of thy coming? The king answered, Yes. He continued, Thou hast come upon pretext of a visitation, but it is in thy heart to question me of thy daughter. Replied the king, 'Tis even so, O thou holy sheikh. And the Envied continued, Send and fetch her, and I trust to heal her forthright, and such it will be, the will of Allah. The king in great joy sent for his daughter, and they brought her pinioned and fettered. The Envied made her sit down behind a curtain, and taking out the hairs, fumigated her therewith, whereupon that which was in her head cried out and departed from her. The girl was at once restored to her right mind, and veiling her face, said, What hath happened, and why have I been brought hither? And the Sultan rejoiced with a joy which nothing could exceed, and kissed his daughter's eyes and the holy man's hand. And then turning to his great lords, he asked, How say ye? What fee deserveth he that hath made my daughter whole? And all answered, He deserveth her to wife. And the king said, Yea, speak sooth. So he married him to her, and the Envied thus became son-in-law to the king. And after a little the wazir died, and the king said, Whom can I make minister in his stead? Thy son-in-law, replied the courtiers. So the Envied became a wazir, and after a while the sultan also died, and the lieges said, Whom shall we make king? And all cried, The wazir. So the wazir was forthright made sultan, and he became king regent, a true ruler of men. One day, as he had mounted his horse, and in the eminence of his kinglyhood was riding amidst his emirs and wazirs, and the grandees of his realm, his eye fell upon his old neighbor, the Envier, who stood afoot on his path. So he turned to one of his ministers and said, Bring hither that man, and cause him no affright. The wazirs brought him, and the king said, Give him 1,000 miskals of gold from the treasury, and load him 10 camels with goods for trade, and send him under escort out of this town. Then he bade his enemy farewell, and sent him away, and forbore to punish him for the many and great evils he had done. See, O Ifrit, the mercy of the Envied to the Envier, who had hated him from the beginning, and had borne him bitter malice, and never met him without causing him trouble, and had driven him from house to house, and then had journeyed for his sole purpose of taking his life by throwing him into the well. Yet he did not requite his injurious dealing, but forgave him, and was bountiful to him. Then I wept before him. Oh, my lady was sore weeping. Never was there sorer. And I recited, Pardon my fault, for 'tis the wise man's wont all faults to pardon and revenge forego. And sooth all manner faults in me contain, then deign of goodness, mercy, grace to show. Whoso imploreth pardon from on high should hold his hands from sinners here below. Said the Ifrit, Lengthen not thy words. As to my slaying thee, fear it not. And as to my pardoning thee, hope it not. For but my bewitching thee, there is no escape. Then he tore me from the ground, which closed under my feet, and flew with me into the firmament till I saw the earth as a large white cloud or a saucer in the midst of the waters. Presently he set me down on a mountain, and taking a little dust, over which he magically murmured some words, sprinkled me therewith, saying, Quit that shape, and take thou the shape of an ape. And on the instant I became an ape, a tailless baboon, the son of a century. Now when he had left me, and saw myself in this ugly and hateful shape, I wept for myself, but resigned my soul to the tyranny of time and circumstance, well weeting that fortune is fair and constant to no man. I descended the mountain, and found at the foot of the desert plain, long and broad, over which I travelled for the space of a month, till my course brought me to the brink of the briny sea. After standing there a while, I was aware of a ship in the offing, which ran into a fair wind, making for the shore. I hid myself behind a rock on the beach, and waited till the ship drew near. When I leaped on board, I found her full of merchants and passengers, and one of them cried, Ho, Captain, this ill-omened brute will bring us ill luck. And another said, Turn this ill-omened beast out from among us. And the captain said, Let us kill it. Another said, Slay it with a sword. A third, Drown it. A fourth said, Shoot it with an arrow. But I sprang up and laid hold of the raw skirt, and shed tears which poured down my chops. The captain took pity on me, and said, O merchants, this ape hath appealed to me for protection, and I will protect him. Henceforth he is under my charge, so let none do him aught hurt or harm, otherwise there will be bad blood between us. Then he entreated me kindly, and whatsoever he said, I understood, and ministered to his every want and will, and served him as a servant, albeit my tongue would not obey my wishes, so that he came to love me. The vessel sailed on the wind being fair for the space of 50 days, at the end of which we cast anchor under the walls of a great city, wherein was a world of people, especially learned men. None could tell their number save Allah. No sooner had we arrived than we were visited by a certain Mamluk official from the king of that city, who after boarding us greeted the merchants, and giving them joy of safe arrival, said, O king, wealth of you, and send you this roll of paper, whereupon each and every one of you must write a line. For ye shall know that the king's minister, a calligrapher of renown, is dead, and the king hath sworn a solemn oath that he will make none wazir in his stead who cannot write as well as he could. He then gave us the scroll, which measured 10 cubits long by a breadth of one, and each of the merchants who knew how to write wrote a line thereon, even to the last of them. After which I stood up, still in the shape of an ape, and snatched the roll out of their hands. They feared lest I should tear it or throw it overboard. They tried to stay me and scare me, but I signed to them that I could write, whereat all marveled, saying, We've never yet seen an ape who could write. And the captain cried, Let him write. And if he scribble and scrabble, we will kick him out and kill him. But if he write fair and scholarly, I will adopt him as my son. For surely I never yet saw an intelligent and well-mannered monkey as were he. Would heaven my real son were his match in morals and manners. I took the reed, and stretching out my paw, dipped it in ink, and wrote in the hand used for letters these two couplets. Time hath recorded gifts she gave the great, but none recorded thine which be far higher. Allah, ne'er orphan men by loss of thee, who would be of goodness mother, bounty sire. And I wrote in Rehani, or letters largely, elegantly curved. Thou hast a reed of reed to every land, whose driving causeth all the world to thrive. Nil is the Nile of Mizram by thy boons, who makest misery smile with fingers five. Then I wrote in the Soul's character, there be no rider who from death shall fleet, but what his hand hath writ men shall repeat. Right. Therefore not save what shall serve thee when thou seest on judgment day, and so thou seest. Then I wrote in the character Nask, who to sore parting fate our love shall doom, to distant life by destiny decreed. We caused the inkhorn's lips to plain our pains, and tongue our utterance with the talking reed. And I wrote in the Tamor character, and I wrote in the character of Muharak. Then I gave the scroll to the officials, and after we had all written our line, they carried it before the king. When he saw the paper, no writing pleased him save my writing, and he said to the assembled courtiers, go seek the writer of these lines, and dress him in a splendid robe of honor. Then mount him on a she-mule. Let a band of music precede him, and bring him into my presence. At these words they smiled, and the king was wroth with them and cried, oh, accursed, I give you an order, and you laugh at me? O king, replied they, if we laugh, 'tis not at thee, and not without a cause. And what is it? Asked he. And they answered, O king, thou orderest to bring into thy presence the man who wrote these lines. No, the truth is that he who wrote them is not of the sons of Adam, but an ape of a tailless baboon belonging to the ship captain. Quoth he, is this true? Is it true what you say? Quoth they, yea, by the signs of thy magnificence. Hmm. The king marveled at their words and shook with mirth and said, I am minded to buy this ape of the captain. Then he sent the messengers to the ship with the mule, the dress, the guard, the state drums, saying, not the less do you clothe him in the honor of the robes and mount him on the mule, and let him be surrounded by the guards and preceded by the band of music. They came to the ship and took me from the captain and robed me in the robe of honor and mounting me on the she-mule, carried me in a state procession through the streets, while the people were amazed and amused. And the folks said to one another, halloo, is our captain about to make an ape his minister? And came all agog crowding to gaze at me. And the town was a store and turned topsy-turvy on my account. When they brought me to the king and set me in his presence, I kissed the ground before him 3 times, and once before the high chamberlain and great officers, and he bade me to be seated. And I sat respectfully on shins and knees, and all who were present marveled at my fine manners, and the king most of all. Thereupon he ordered the lieges to retire, and when none remained save the king's majesty, the eunuch on duty, and a little white slave, he bade them set before me the table of food, containing all manner of birds, whatever hoppeth and flieth, and treadeth in nests, such as quail and sound grouse. Then he signed to me to eat with him. So I arose and kissed the ground before him, and sat down and ate with him. And when the table was removed, I washed my hands in 7 waters, and took the reed case and reed, and wrote instead of speaking these couplets. Wail for the little partridges on porringer and plate. Cry for the ruin of the fries and the stews well marinated. Keen as I keen for loved lost daughters of the catagros, an omelet round the fair and brown fowls agglutinate. O fire and heart of me for fish, these deux poissons I saw, bedded on noon-made scones and cakes and piles to lenate. For thee, O vermicelli, aches my very maw. I hold without thee every taste, joy, or clean annihilate. Those eyes, those eggs have rolled their yellow eyes in torturing pains of fire, ere served with hash and fritters hot, that delicate. Praised be Allah for his baked and roast and how good. This pulse these pot herbs steeped in oil with isil combinate. When hunger sated was, I elbow propped fell back upon meat pudding, wherein gleamed the bangles that my wits amate. Then woke I, sleeping appetite, to eat as though in sport, sweets from brocaded trays and kickshaws most elaborate. Be patient, soul of me, time is haughty jealous wit. Today he seems dark lowering, and tomorrow fair to sight. Then I rose and seated myself at a respectful distance from the king, while he read what I had written, and marveled, exclaiming, "Oh, the miracle that an ape should be gifted with this graceful style and this power of penmanship! By Allah, 'tis a wonder of wonders." Presently they set before the king choice wines and flagons of glass, and he drank. And he passed on the cup to me, and I kissed the ground and drank and wrote on it. With fire they boiled me to loose my tongue, and pain and patience gave for fellowship. Hence comes its hands of men unbear me high, and honey dew from lips of maid I sip. Morn saith to night, withdraw and let me shine. So drain we drops that dull all pain and pine. I doubt, so fine the glass, the wine so clear, if 'tis the wine and glass, or glass and wine. The king read my verse and said with a sigh, were these gifts in a man, he would excel all the folks of this time and his ages. Then he called for the chessboard and said, say, wilt thou play with me? And I signed with my head, yes. Then I came forward and ordered the pieces and played with him 2 games, both of which I won. He was speechless with surprise. So I took the pen case and, drawing forth a reed, wrote on the board these 2 couplets. Two hosts, fair fighting through the livelong day, nor is their battle over finished, until when darkness girdeth them about, the twain go sleeping in a single bed. The king read these lines with wonder and delight, and said to his eunuch, O Mukbil, go to thy mistress Sit al-Hud, and say to her, come speak, the king who biddeth thee hither to take thy solace in seeing this right wondrous ape. So the eunuch went out, and presently returned with a lady, who, when she saw him, veiled her face and said, O my father, hast thou lost all sense and honor? How cometh it thou pleased to send for me and show me this strange man? O Sit al-Husn, said he, no man is here save this little foot-page and the eunuch who reared thee, and I thy father, from whom thou dost veil thy face. She answered, this whom thou deemest an ape is a young man, a clever and polite, a wise and learned, and the son of a king, but he's ensorcelled. And the Ifrit, Jijaris, who is of the seed of Iblis, cast a spell on him after putting to death his own wife, the daughter of King Ifitmus, lord of the islands of Abnus. The king marveled at his daughter's words, and turning to me said, is this true what she has saith? And I signed by a nod of my head, yea, verily, and I wept sorely. Then he answered his daughter, whence knewest thou that he was ensorcelled? And she answered, oh, my dear papa, there was with me in my childhood an old woman, a wily one, and a wise one, and a witch to boot, and she taught me the theory of magic and its practice, and I took notes in writing, and therein waxed perfect, and have committed to memory 170 chapters of agrammatic formulas, by the least of which I could transport the stones of thy city behind the Mount Calf and the circumambient main, or make it sight an abyss of the sea and its people fishes swimming in the midst of it. Oh, my daughter, said her father, I conjure thee by life, disenchant this young fellow, that I may make him my wazir and marry thee to him. For indeed he is an ingenious youth and deeply learned. With joy and great grief, she replied, and handing in hand an iron knife, whereon was inscribed the name of Allah in Hebrew characters, she described a wide circle. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. And so now I leave thee until the morrow.